Dear reader, hello. Whenever you're here watching this on YouTube, I'm so honoured to be at this imaginary event. Dear friends and colleagues, this is coming to you from a vulnerable place, Sunday afternoon. Our practices have converged in an interest in politics and the optics of official archival spaces, archives as sites of knowledge and narrative influence. My work circles around ideas of value, using queerness, marginality, otherness, desire, intimacy, conspiracy and the metabolization of conspiracy as lenses with which to approach these ideas. Having picked up our exhibition, you're likely curious about just what fantasies you'll find here. The library as a curatorial space, a physical knowledge infrastructure organised as the veritable index of cultural and epistemological orders and aspirations, but also as a virtual domain of possibilities for other orders, logics and dispositions. A novel is a body of water from which I frantically wanted to drink. The imaginary cruising is not formed in opposition to reality, as its denial or compensation. It is born and takes shape in the interval between books. And now the book marches on towards an imaginary boundary, more significant in its life than passing through the looking glass. It's no longer the same book. Before it was part of a universal, abstract, indifferent memory where all books are equal. Here it has been picked out, preferred over the others. Here it is indispensable to its reader, torn from its galaxy. This and other universes offer up their keys to us, simply because these readers, each working on their own slice of universal memory, will have laid the fragments of a single secret, end to end. The collection is a place of experimentation, and the temporary exhibition, the mainstream, is vulgar. Global, interchangeable, temporary shows are designed to reach the masses, appeal to the widest audience to generate ticket sales. A museum's collection builds memory, writes history. A history under pressure for its biases and blind spots. In order to address this, it has to take risks, find narratives that not just assess the past, but the present. Temporary exhibition as entertainment, collection as repository of knowledge. The notion of the archive is used literally as well as figuratively. Literally, it refers to the institution or material site, in short, a building filled with documents and objects. Figuratively, it concerns a much more general and ungraspable notion of knowledge and memory practices, not bound by or located in an institutional organisation. Especially Foucault's notion of the archive seems to be responsible for this figurative use. He used the term archive for a law of what can be said, or a set of discursive rules. Such a set of discursive rule consists of specific conceptual distinctions that determine what can be said and what cannot be said. In that sense, discursive rules also always imply exclusions. Archive then covers two kinds of knowledge. Knowledge that can be articulated and objectified by convergent discursive rules, and knowledge that remains overlooked because of the same discursive rules, now working as rules of exclusion. Practices of knowledge production that are overlooked, not taken seriously, considered as unimportant or without any value. Archiving is part not only of the politics of visibility, but also those of absence, derived from actions of selection, erasures, exclusion, not seeing, not recognizing, forgetting. Prestige is a system of hierarchies of agreed upon social value. Something is prestigious if a group agrees it's prestigious. Otherwise, it's just an individual's fetish. As repositories of collective memory, they are all traditionally based on nationalistic and objective principles of organisation, which, in the case of the library, manifest themselves in a rigid order derived through themes, numbers, and alphabetical sequences. Especially with regard to archives and museums, it has become the standard practice to invite independent agents, typically those referred to as artists, to engage with existing collections in radical or novel ways, with the hope of reanimating the holdings according to contemporary agendas or alternative histories and epistemologies, all while refurbishing the attraction of aging institutions and soliciting new audiences. In this video documentation of an exhibition that didn't happen, you'll find from me a series of drawings, tinfoil sculptures, and collages. In this exhibition that certainly happened, you'll find from me a series of me's, some horses, swans, Tipex, stolen photos, and Beardsley borders. I also repeatedly use self-portraiture in the series. Hanging all together, lined up like a procession of frieze, my individuality seemed to disappear in the repetition, and it allowed the embodiment of something beyond my own likeness. Art of preserving any myth is excluding whatever stands out of the narratives. From a national perspective, the individual body is reproducing itself inside the nuclear family, while working inside capitalist survival economies. The aesthetics of the national body narrate obedience to religious values, a healthy and sinless body. If queer politics start most often from the body, collective or individual, What makes an exhibition queer should perhaps look at the ways that the queer body is narrated, signified, exposed and fetishized. A body that performs different from the national body through life choices, fashion and inventory of gestures. A fascinating subject and target for brutality motivated by transphobic, lesbophobic and racist views among others. It is autofiction, fetishizing of young meat, cishet gay culture, contrasted with femme flamboyant figures, pink flamingos, ideas of becoming, thinking of Lear while removing the Christian colonial additions to this story, a story of becoming, transition, of force, erotic melancholia, ideas of becoming, to devour, to change, to become, to love, to devour, to change, to become, to love, to devour. A queer anthology of rage. I'm still thinking about how in 2020, when a cruise ship breaking COVID isolation rules of primarily white cis gay men sailed from California to Puerto Vallarta, this story has stuck with me for a few reasons. The first is an experience of dissonance with my own socio-political grouping, noting a distinct lack of community being displayed. The colonial connotations of a boat of white men sailing to take the resources, in this case beaches in which to party, frolic and fuck on, from lands occupied by non-white people with no care for potential diseases that are brought, is also not lost on me. I'm not venerating classical war stories, but rather working with metaphors which involve psychological pain. I realised it's hard to wear the face of your personal oppressor, but if you point the finger, you must be able to bend it back. Feasting, dancing, love-making, warring, dreaming, taking. What happens when something is taken away? Erasure coming up again. Erasure is never merely a matter of making things disappear. There is always some detritus strewn about in the aftermath, some bruising to the surface from which the word or image has been removed, some reminder of the violence done to make the world look new again. Whether rubbed away, crossed out or reinscribed, the rejected entity has a habit of returning, ghost-like, if only in the marks that usurp its place and attest its passing. Preferred to suggest the presence rather than show directly, I was more interested in leaving the image in suspension, standing with no ground. In my mind, the characters operate in the space like actors on a stage, because this is an act playing out. It's a bit like pausing a cinematic scene and focusing on what the actions are setting the tone of the atmosphere. I trust that the viewer is able to follow and understand the spatial relationships without every detail having been laid out. I see the absence of a literally described place as an entry point for the viewer, where they become an active participant in the creation of this world. You're a drag queen? Nothing this pretty could be real. Drawing is drawing. Confidence, style, what are we supposed to do with it? Are you making value-based judgments? Are you falling for the lark of the thing? Ornamentally overflowing, too much beauty, have even more beauty, don't like it, take more, too much good taste. Culture has been mined and refined to maddening blandness. Vulgar images react against this tasteful homogeny. Relentless artificiality. It's too much, it's too fantastic, it's not to be believed. Standard phrases of camp enthusiasm. The hallmark of camp is the spirit of extravagance. They are vulgar images if they share figurative, tasteless, illegible, stupid, fake, disembodied, grotesque, transformed. The whole lipstick on a pig thing makes no sense because the second we gave a pig access to makeup, she became God's cuntiest soldier. Drawing ephemeral, suddenly here basic mass-produced material. American teen films, leftovers or towels wrapped like a swan, foil horses, granny's panties, tchotchkes, middle-class collectibles, reaching for something, striving for grandeur as queer talismans of resistance and belonging, composed of foil, adaptive, reproductive, chameleon or even parasite-like, cling to the shapes and copy them. Foil communicates in a way that itself is unaware, presenting an apparently sure exterior. It holds its own secrets inside. They are cold, almost cheap, sterile and oddly vulnerable. Easily one senses, dented or torn. Unlike their real counterparts, they are neither robust nor flourishing. Look at the language of tinfoil as being something not true or truthful, that it had a pretend or a lie through it. The foil provides a high shine finish that operates in a fool's gold way, questioning value, keeping tongue firmly in cheek. This material draws on camp and its aims should be taken seriously while failing at these serious aspirations. These sculptures are quite literally plucked as if this occurred by reaching into the wall works and pulling out the creatures. I'm interested in how the presentation of the same narrative in two different material forms enhances or even creates a new narrative potential for an audience, moving somewhere that isn't a remake, a cover instead. The price to pay when included in the archive. But once one is inside an archival organisation, other problems arise. One does not exist in one's unique individual specificity, but as an example of how one is categorised in the archive. This is especially the case in the type of modern archiving. We do not develop, transform or build our identity, but are pinned down to an identity that is fixed. This inclination to fixing identity is, for example, demonstrated by recent classifications of gender and sexuality. Identity is no longer seen as transgression, as a classification you should challenge in order to be free, but as a box in which you should feel understood and safe. The irony is also that the Q of queer has been added to this listing of identities. This is ironic because queer in fact indicates the resistance against the pigeonholing of identities. But now even queer people are boxed in by making them part of this list. Queerness is not yet here, queerness is an ideality. Put another way, we are not yet queer. We may never touch queerness, but we can feel it as the warm illumination of a horizon imbued with potentiality. We have never been queer, yet queerness exists for us as an ideality that can be distilled from the past and used to imagine a future. The future is queerness's domain. In the 1990s, American philosopher Judith Butler argued that we are not born with a gender or sexual identity, we constitute these identities by performative behaviour. This theory of performativity implies that gender identity and sexual identity are not fixed. At first sight, categorising it and classifying identities is not a problem, because it acknowledges difference. But as Iris van der Toen has argued, categorising is a practice of fixation. You can no longer escape the category that boxes you in. There is no escape anymore from this pigeonholing. Breaking news, Judith Butler begins a holy war. There are two genders, fascists and anti-fascists. We must become erotically free and socially responsible, engage in politics. Being gay is not a movie. Boycott the parks and toilets, come out of hiding, take to the streets, rally for your rights. Fairies and Leathermen should end their feud and fight for their freedom side by side. A queer way of being in the state, then, would have to give up queer theory's fetish for marginalisation, what Heather Love has criticised as its normative injunction to be deviant. Doing so would resolve one paradox at the heart of the queer project, namely that for all of the field's anti-normative impulses, its practitioners do in fact typically harbour normative agendas for which they advocate. Acknowledging this to be the case will clear a major obstacle to its ability to envision a queer state. A queer state would thus enable critique, but it would be a critique with purpose, robust criticism that both prevents mythologies of the state from taking shape and leaves open the possibility of sudden emancipatory change. A queer theory of the state would necessitate that queer theory and progressive politics more broadly leave behind its anti-majoritarian impulses and its fear of state power while retaining its potency.